Okay, I'm going to admit everyone in and then disable waiting room.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Right to Speak workshop number 4, where we're actually looking at proposal writing, picking up from yesterday's workshop on understanding the funding landscape, which was conducted by my colleague Ismail Mohammed from the Center for Creative Arts. So let's just wait for a few minutes for people, a few seconds for people to just connect, and we will be able to kick off. So my name is Sipindi Leshongwa. I'm the curator for the Poetry Africa Festival. Let's get the formalities out of the way. I would like to appreciate the support of the Goethe-Institut, the French Institute of South Africa, the Hear My Voice team, the Flanders State of the Arts, as well as Wallonie-Bruxelles International, for the support that they have given for the two organizations, Center for Creative Arts via Poetry Africa, as well as the Hear My Voice team, to actually offer these workshops to all in attendance tonight. So I'd like this session to be interactive. I know that we've requested you guys to actually mute your mics, but however, by show of hands, how many of you in this room have written a proposal, a funding proposal? By show of hands. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So we can take down those hands. Thank you. Let's move to the next question. How many of you in this room have written a successful proposal where you actually got the funding for it? By show of hands. All right. Okay. All right. So how many of you in the room, that question, how many of you in the room have written an unsuccessful proposal? Okay, it seems to be a balance. Thank you so much. There seems to be a balance on writing proposal, being successful and unsuccessful. That merely means that not every proposal that you write, you're going to get the funding that you require, because the funding structures changes and organizations change their objectives. And sometimes they just want to shift their funding to other spaces as well. So I'm going to be taking you on a quick presentation, and feel free to write your questions on the chat. My colleague Ismail Mohammed will be able to share those with me via WhatsApp. So to kick off the proposal writing workshop. So I've seen quite a few have written proposals. This is what we are sharing as a Center for Creative Arts that has yielded fruit and sometimes not yielded fruits for us, but nevertheless, we don't give up. We continue writing these proposals until we get we yield some fruits from it. So when you're writing a proposal, you are introducing your organization to a funder, and you're introducing a project to a funder, someone that doesn't even know you, nor met you or engaged with you. Maybe they haven't even engaged with your organization as well. So it's important that you are able to sell your proposal, because it speaks on your behalf. It becomes the face of the organization that you are representing. We also have Bash Siddiq, who's doing our technical background as well. So let's dive straight to it. So when you are introducing your organization, you need to, on a proposal, you need to give us a full name of your organization, a registered name of the organization. What is the organization? Center for Creative Arts, right? Where is it based? We are based in KwaZulu-Natal, in Durban. We are part of the University of KwaZulu-Natal as well. So you're just giving them background information on the organization itself. When you open your first page, when you're talking about the organization, that's the information you should be giving them. When was it established? Why was it established? It's important to actually give those reasons so that when they know what it is that they are dealing with, what organization, how long this organization has been in existence. And we know that in some of the call out for funding, they specify that an organization needs to have been running for a year or two. So it depends on the funding body itself, what it is that they require. But you must be able to give that information to them. And also highlight the success of the organization. Have it won any awards? You don't have to, if you're just starting up an organization, you don't have to create that by lying and saying you've won organization, some awards, knowing that you just established the organization itself. You just need to be as honest as possible. But it's also good to just, if you have been in existence for quite some time, and just highlight those success moments for the organization that you are running. So it's very important to actually get into that introduction of the organization. So I'm not sure if I am audible. Can you just show hands if I am audible, so that just indicate? Okay, all right, thank you so much. Okay, let's continue. Cool. Okay, then we move into the introduction of the project. So when you introducing the project to the funder, what is the project? You need to tell them what it is. We are dealing with poetry, so what is this? As much as a poetry related projects, but you need to be specific what it is. Is it a developmental program for poets? Or is it a festival that you want to put up? So it's one of those things where you just need to introduce it. This is the project. You have to give us the aims also for the project. What are the aims? So when we are talking about the aims, we are actually talking about the overall target of that project, what it is, why you want to actually do this project. And then you take us through the objective, what it is that you're going to do to be able to achieve the aims that you have set for the organization. And then we move into your mission statement, as well as the impact that the project will make. And then we move into something that I believe, or that on a yearly basis, each organization needs to engage in, a pastoral analysis of the organization itself, or the projects that you've been doing, just so that you are able to plan for the year ahead. You have to look at the pastoral, which is the political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental aspect of the project. So when you're talking about the political, you're looking at what are government policies that could benefit or disrupt the success of your project. So you are looking at right now politically, what are policies that have been imposed by the government itself? Will that disrupt your project, or would that be part of the success of your project? Then you look at your economic, you evaluate how the project will address the economic issues. Right now, we know in South Africa, we're facing a huge unemployment of the youth. So we are looking at opportunities for jobs, creating jobs for the youth, and what skills transfers that can be done. So you are addressing the issues of the economy in South Africa when you actually doing, what is it that you are doing in your projects to address those issues? And we also look at the social. How do our audiences and potential audiences, demographic trends and values influence their engagement habits? So you're also looking at the social needs, and also sometimes you can even identify other organizations that do the same job as you do. How can you come together and actually be able to be as strong to work towards alleviating all the social ills that we are facing in our different communities? Then we look at the technological. How can technology impact on our growth or success? I think we have come into the realization in the past 2 years that when COVID hit, that we needed technology more than we ever did. One of the successes, if I may share, with the Poetry Africa Festival, as much as we were an international festival, we had the participation, but being online for the past 2 years, it worked for our good. We attracted a lot of partners in the past 2 years who wanted to come in on board and actually produce certain exchange programs on an online platform, and it actually grew legs for the festival and creates. Please, can you switch off our microphones? So it created a huge footprint for the festival. So it's how we take advantage of the technology that is into play. Then we look at the legal aspect, which is how much what existing or future legal frameworks impact your organization's ability to operate. So this is something, the legal part is often overlooked. Maybe I might say I'm talking from a perspective of being at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and having the legal department on our disposal. So whenever we are receiving a contract, we don't deal with that. We just send it straight to the legal department to deal with. So it gives us that soft cushion to deal with threats that might impact the ability to operate as an organization. So it's something that you need to bear in mind. What are legal implications that may affect your project, or what it is, how can you circumvent all those issues? So that are the legal issues that you need to look at. And then when you move on to the aspect on environmental, we look at how much environmental changes help or hinder your project or organization's ability to operate. So like I said, we experienced that in the past 2 years, but also sometimes, funders, they specific in terms of, we want to fund organizations that are based in rural areas. We want to focus on women, we want to focus on youth, but because of the space that you're in might hinder the ability to operate. So if you are in Johannesburg, you might not be able to operate in Durban because of a funding structure. But if you come in and partner with another organization, that you are able to tap into the rural areas, we are able to tap into the urban areas as well. So the changes that we are looking at, they might affect, environmental changes might affect. COVID-19 affected quite a lot of things. There's quite a lot of changes that are happening in our environment. Then we look at the SWOT analysis. This is also one of the analysis that needs to be done on a yearly basis with an organization, looking at your strengths, your opportunities, your weaknesses, and threats. When you're looking at your strength, you're looking at what makes your objective stand out, what makes your project stand out from the rest. What it is, maybe the skill sets of the team that you have. Someone might be strong in administration, someone is strong in social media and marketing. So you possess all the strong skills to be able to do that project. And then you also talk about your opportunities as well. What can you identify within the project, which can be used to break new grounds and grow the projects? So I believe that you should not keep yourself in a cocoon. You must identify opportunities that can actually grow your project, benefit your project. I think Ismail touched on this yesterday when you talked about partnership, when you was talking about partnerships, that you can identify opportunities by partnering with other organizations who've got similar objectives as you are, as you guys have, the organization possess. So that's one thing, that those are the opportunities that you need to seed. I'm sure there's a lot that you can break down within your organizations. What opportunities are there for you? What are the partnership opportunities? What are the opportunities for funding? Do we have to come together? I think that's one thing that we've learned within the past 2 years, that working in silos is not sustainable. So coming together like we did now, looking at the application we put through for this project, it was not a one-man show, but it brought all the different organizations to come together to put this proposal through and hence to receive funding for it. So it's those opportunities of how do we sustain our living within the arts organization. And then you look at your weaknesses. That's when you have to be honest, be vulnerable with yourselves as an organization. You don't have to be all gloomy every time you are all up and everything is going well for you. There are times where things are just not going well, but you need to be honest with yourself. And those are the weaknesses which can be easily turned into your opportunities. So we know that weakness could be funding. There's a smaller pool of funding that is available, but we are all gunning for it. So possibilities are we will not receive the funding that we intend to get, but that's something that needs to be put out there. Sometimes you have skills shortages within the organization. Some funding bodies, they do ask you questions while you're doing your applications, if there is a skill that you would like them to offer to you. So that's a time where you need to admit, yes, I've got a skill shortage in this, in administration, which is very important. It's often overlooked. When you say you're an administrator, everyone just overlook like you are nothing, but you are the backbone of that organization. You are ensuring that all the filing is up to date, and you are ensuring that they are keeping to the terms and condition of the funding if they've received it. So it's important to actually declare that and say, yes, we do have a shortage in this certain skill. May it be finance as well, because finance is one of the important skills that you require within an organization. They can be able to offer that training to you so that you are able to run a sustainable organization. And then you look at the threats as well. So you, like I said, there is more people coming into play. When we started, people, even poets, if I may say, they were not looking at it as a business that could sustain them. They were just waiting for organization to apply for funding, get funding, and then offer them the job to come in and do their job and perform their poetry. But now it's like more and more poets are actually getting the knowledge of how to run an organization. So it's like there's more people now who are coming into play, who are competing for the very same funding that we are looking at and that we have been focusing on. So it's that thing when you see now, oh, it's a threat, but it can be an opportunity again, because I can be able to tap into other organizations or pair up with other organizations and be able to sustain projects that we want to do. So all the things that we are looking at, the weaknesses and the strength, can be easily turned into opportunities that would need to be tapped into. So there's a question: must the past still be included in the funding application, or it is for preparation? From my experience, I think I've been including that, because it gives a clear picture to the funder that you are actually doing introspection as an organization and you are truthful to the job that you are doing. So it's important to actually put it out there so that you make them aware that you are aware of the things that are happening around you. It's information that could assist and make you receive favor in the eyes of the funder, because it's important every time when you're portraying like the grades to you, you need to sometimes actually reflect and say, hey, here's the truth, So it's important for me, it's important to actually share this information with a person who has not necessarily engaged with my organization, but they would like to know more from my organization. How are we looking at it on the inside and how are they receiving it from the outside as well? And then you also need to state your target audiences. Some funding bodies are very specific. They will tell you that we are looking to fund women projects. So if they're saying we are looking at women voices or narrative, you cannot bring in, you cannot say the targeted audience is the children that you and the admin or the skills transfer that you need, but you need to focus on the women program. So if you're doing a program for poets, you want to deal about issues of healing, you bring in this is the targeted audience. If it's gender-based violence, you're looking for women who have been affected by gender-based violence, and how do you facilitate healing for those audiences? So it's you being able to sell your project aligned to the objective of a funder. And also the one thing is, what is, upon engagement with those audiences, what is the desired output? For instance, for Poetry Africa last year, we produced 2 anthologies. So one was focusing on the hashtag movement in South Africa, like your hashtag gender-based violence, hashtag fish must fall, hashtag am I next. So we collected from our archive in celebration of 25 years of Poetry Africa, we collected works from women poets who have been a voice for social change. And then we grouped them all together. We got their poems, and the output for the project was the anthology. So for instance, you can also be in a point of running a developmental program, offer training to upcoming poets, and then they go through some training, they get their poems, creative writing workshops, they get their poems edited, and then you come up with an anthology. And after you've got that anthology, you can create legs for that anthology. In that way, you are creating jobs for the poets, the contributor itself. And when you were to share that work with international bodies or partners that you're working with, you are creating legs, you are creating mobility for those poets as well. So that's one of the projects that you'd have to look at when you're saying what is the target, when you're identifying your target audience, and what is the desired output for it. So everything, you must not do it just to tick a box. You must do it with an intention to have a tangible output. So we're looking at the next part is looking at funding and budget. So in some applications, they'll ask you, how much funding have you raised? So if you were to go to the NAC, like we've often seen on their online platform, so they'll ask you, how much is the project? You say it's 100,000 rands. And then they'll ask you, how much have you got? And then you state, this is how much I've got. And then how much do you require from the NAC? So if a funder sees that you are able to say you have already secured funding, there's a huge possibility that they'll come in, because funders don't actually want to fund some, like if there isn't any seed funding that you have worked on, because they're thinking, what if they pull off and they don't actually give you funding? Does it mean that your project will not be able to happen? So you need to be able to have multiple streams of income. So you need to get to a point where you have seed funding, and then you go and request funding from an outside source. There's a question that has come through. Does the criteria differ if you're applying as an individual and not as an organization? Yes, it does. The criteria does differ. When you are operating as an individual, you are operating as an individual, so there is no organization. So the required documents that you need to submit are much different than what the organization would need to submit. The proposal that you send as well would need to be speaking to the project that you want to do. You're funding yourself. You're not funding an organization. You're not requesting a funding for an organization that can feed different individuals, but you are funding yourself and the project that speaks to you only. So for instance, let's say there is a show that you want to put up, a poetry show. So it would not look at, you'd be submitting a fee just for yourself, the admin staff, the technical, and just the well-being of the project itself. But when you are looking at the organization, when they are funding a project, because there's a difference when the funders do not fund the organization, but they most lenient to funding the projects that you are doing, but not the organization, like the infrastructure and everything else. So when you are funding, the criteria is quite different for an individual or an organization. An organization, you would require as well, like a banking detail that is under the organization. You'd require a tax clearance that is under the organization, the banking details that are under the organization as well. But on the other end, it's an individual application that would require your individual documentation as well as the expected output as per your proposal. So another question that just came through, does the criteria differ if you're applying? Okay, this is a same question that I've got, sorry about that. So like I said, when you need to have a seed funding to actually get people to buy into your idea, because that it basically means you're not sitting and expecting money from one funder. But it's important to look for multiple streams of income. Who can you come with? For instance, we are at the university. The Center for Creative Arts is owned by the university. So the infrastructure at the center, we don't pay for our office, we don't pay for our phone bills or anything, but the only thing that we are focused on is the project itself. They pay for our salaries. We are focused on the project itself. So you might be in the same setup as we are or not be. But when funders come in, they want to at least for you to prove that you can sustain your organization. You are not depending on the project's funding, because when they come in, they are funding merely the projects. So once you start adding on the budget, your salaries, you start adding everything, it's like, okay, now the center or this organization is depending on us to actually make, and to save for the center or organization to survive. In terms of the budget, so you'd need to do a very clear budget where it's itemized. So you have to have it in like items like the fees. You're looking at the technical, we're looking at accommodation, the flights, the transport, per diems, marketing, auditing fees, etc. And I think that's the most overlooked, which is auditing fees, that we really need to actually account for them, because sometimes when you apply, if you have been existing for a year or two, they will request you for audited financial statements. So if you do not account, you do not budget for your audit fees, so it's impossible for you to actually get your project audited, which is something that needs to be done so that you are able to be compliant with SARS, you are able to be compliant with your partners or funders. So it's important that you do fit in a fee for audit. There's something that I'm also thinking is part of the infrastructure that we often overlook, the legal aspect of it. Sometimes when we may not really deal with the clauses that are being on our contract, we are not understanding them. So we actually need someone to interpret those clauses to us, because they are very tricky. They are too legal. Even ourselves, when we receive the contract, we send it to the legal department, then they come back and they highlight a certain clause. This clause means A, B, and C. And then when we understand, it's like, okay, now we need to send it back to the funder and actually seek clarity, or just state that would like for it not to be part of the contract. But so far, it's been working good for us because we have that facility of a legal department within the university. So the question here is, what would be a typical example of a technical in a budget? So the technical aspect, you'll be looking at your lights, you're looking at your sound, you're looking at your stage. If there's something that needs to be projected on stage, you're looking at your projection. Those form part of your technical aspect of the project. This includes the sound technician and light technician that you need to be in place. So those people are actually ensuring that the technical is on par, that you don't have to deal with a microphone that is not working, but they are there to ensure that the mic is working. And then the other question is, I'm looking into exploring poetry genres that are unique and can attract buyers. I've been writing and publishing random poems with random themes. How does one intentionally plan to create poetry that will attract funding and sales? Quite an interesting question. So the environment is not the same. We are online most of the time, and we have to look at ways of diversifying our poetry, where we are not looking at one dimension where I just get up on stage and stand behind the mic and just recite my poetry. But what other, can I link up with a visual artist to present my poetry? Can I link up with a dancer to present my poetry? Can I also look at multimedia? How can I incorporate it to my poetry to make it more accessible, to make it more enticing, to attract newer audiences to come into play? Someone who's not necessarily a poet, but who's inclined to dance is most likely to come across your piece if you are collaborating with a dancer, a visual artist, a multimedia artist. So it's that thing, how do you translate your poetry in different mediums to be able to catch the eye of a person who may not necessarily be engaging with poetry? Yeah, you can also look at, I've been studying quite a lot of poets. They've been creating merchandise of snippets of their poems. They've been on TikTok, you know, doing some collabs on TikTok, and they actually selling pictures now of their poetry. They've got portraits now of their poetry that they have incorporated in the artwork. So it's how you see yourself, the direction that you want to go through. It's how you invest your time into learning about a different space, and how can you tap to those audiences, and eventually building up those numbers, making yourself known. And I think that's the most that I can advise on the point of intentionally planning to create and attract funding as well. So one thing that is as also may also contribute to the to attract funding as well. I think we spoke about this, the corporate funding as well. It's the numbers, it's the following that you have on social media that works for you as well, that speaks for you before you even say anything. Once you get to a sponsor, you're like, okay, I've got 22,000 followers on this page. This is my database. This is the work that I've done. This is the collaboration that I've done. So I think this is a great time for people to venture out and move from their comfort zone. Just give us something that will blow our minds off. So you would also want to, in a proposal, to acknowledge, just write out how you would acknowledge the funder. How can the intended funder benefit from the partnership? So it has been speaking opportunities on opening nights or special events between the project. You want to give them branding opportunities on your posters, your banners, your catalog on social media. So it's those opportunities that you can offer to an intended funder that they'll most likely want to be like, okay, these people have such a following on social media. I want to be part of this. I want to speak on the work that we do. So they're going to give me a speaking opportunity. I'm going to get a chance to actually speak about the work that we do. For instance, we just had our film festival. We gave an opportunity to the National Film and Video Foundation, who were actually funding us. They got an opportunity to actually speak about the PESP funding. So it's that thing, how do they leverage off our platform and how do we do the same from theirs? And also acknowledging when there's support for on our press releases. So every time you're writing a press release, you would have to actually include them. So they're actually looking at the mileage that you are giving them every time they give you funding. So it's important also when you are doing your projects that you also have a media monitoring tool so that you are able to track the marketing value for the project through media, social media, the radio and television and newspapers. So in that way, it's something that you can just throw out there to the funders and just say, this is the marketing value that you can get if you come into play with us and then just support the projects that we do. So if you have been doing projects, find a media monitoring tool and be able to track all those articles and find a value for those articles, those radio mentions, and all that. So those are the statistics that they look at as well. And then in general, then you have your general category when you actually writing now your closing statement and what positive change their contribution will bring to the organization, looking at local level, national level, and international, looking at the international community as well. So you also mention, as I've said, the mileage that they'll receive from investing in the project and the marketing value. It's very important that you give them that point at the end and say, okay, after all that been said and done, this is what you're signing, you might be signing yourself to get into. So it's also nice to just give those figures, your social media figures. You also give your marketing value for the entire festival. So when people might ask what the marketing value, sometimes it helps to have a marketing team in place who can monitor all these things for you, who can secure all these interviews for you and newspaper articles. So it's something that at the end, there is a value to it. As much as you are not paying it, but it is a huge value that contribute towards your proposal. So, okay, I thought it was a new question. No new question at all. So right now, I'm just gonna take you through. So those are the few steps. Sometimes a funder will ask you for a copy of previous work. They'll ask you, please attach work that you have done before. It might be your media report that you submit. To submit a catalog or a program, some pictures, just as evidence that you have done this job before. And they will ask for references as well. It's important to actually establish people who will be great reference to the work that you do. So you would have organizations maybe that you have partnered with such a festival. For instance, if we are getting reference letters, we have an outreach program that we are working with different municipalities which are under KwaZulu-Natal. So we'll tap into Umgeni municipality and say, because there are so many projects that we are doing there, can we have a reference letter, or Umgeni tourism, and say, can we have a reference letter? They would reference ourselves people because they know the quality of the job that we do. We will go to Ulutuli Museum in Groundville, which is a different municipality as opposed to Durban. They will also give us a great reference because they know the job that we've been doing with them over the years. And also we go to the rural area and tap into Wushwini Art Center. We know that we're going to get a reference for that, for the job that we do. So it's not about connecting with your friends, they're writing reference that are untrue. So you need to identify yourself in organizations, identify yourself in communities, identify yourself even in the space. Find your identity, your footprint as an organization, what it is, and who are the people that you are working with, who are the people who will be able to refer your work to other people. Sometimes the projects that we do, it's not about us applying for funding, but it's about the connections that we have, the people that we've worked with, and how they reference us in certain spaces when they engage with possible funders. So it's important that we also work well with other people. So they ask you sometimes for funding some documents, so it varies. What I've highlighted here, it is documents that they often require if you are applying within government. So they'll ask you for your registration certificates. Are you a registered organization? Then you have to submit that. They'll ask you for a tax clearance. So for those who have not, but now it's referred to as a tax compliance status. Because they're no longer issuing a certificate, they give you a PIN. So a tax compliance status where a funder just goes into a SARS website and click and input your information and using your PIN, then they get the status. I think it's one of the security things that they put up because I think people can just edit certificates. So they just decided that people who want to access your tax compliance information, they need to go to the SARS website. So you need to register your organization with SARS, and then you can be able to get your tax compliance status for free. It's a free service, you don't have to pay for it. They also require a letter of authority. The letter of authority, it comes from your organization. So they'll have to state in that who is authorized to oversee the project and sign legal documents. But that is also stipulated in the organization's constitution. For instance, us at the Center for Creative Arts, like I said, we only receive the contract and we send it to the legal department, and then the registrar of the university signs on our behalf. Should there be any hassle, should we experience a part or an organization or a funder structure that doesn't want to pay after we've signed a contract, we don't have to worry about that. We know that the legal department will take care of that. So we don't sign those, we are not authorized to sign those contracts. So submitting a letter of authority will state that, yes, the registrar is an authorized signatory for the university, but Sipindile Hlongwa or Ismail Mohammed is an overseer for this project. So he's an executor for the project. Then you'd need to submit a certified ID copy of the signatory. That's part of the supporting documents. Government department, they will send you an entity document. An entity document, it's basically filling in the information of your organization and taking it to the bank to get your bank account verified. Is it still in existence? Because sometimes people can submit banking details while that account does not belong to the organization. That account is no longer valid. So it needs to be stamped by the bank to verify that your banking details are correct. They've changed now. Previously, they used to say, submit your entity document where it has to be stamped in the bank. And then they say, submit your proof of banking details, which is essentially is the same thing. But I think now it's like they're walking up and said, oh, it's the same thing. We shouldn't ask people to send the same document. And then there is an SBD4 form that they normally require. The SBD4 form as a form, it's a declaration of interest. So it is used by government departments. If you know someone who works within the department, in the procurement department, someone you are related to, you are friends with, you need to declare all those things so that they know when they're giving you this funding, you did not do some shenanigans in the end and got the funding, but it's clearly, it's up there. It's a declaration. I know this person or I don't know anybody, but you just need to put it there on an SBD4 form. And then there is something that is called the Central Supplier Database for Government. So if you would want to work on tenders for government, and also you need to, as an organization, not as an individual. As an individual, you do not have to fill in your SPT4 form. It's for tendering purposes. The CSD, your organization needs to be registered on the Central Supplier Database. So it's National Treasury. In the years back, you needed to register in your province, but now they've changed everything. You need to do it on National Treasury. So you put all your details in there, and that way you are able to work for any government department. So you can submit for your tenders. If they are looking for a service provider, maybe training poets on creative writing, you can actually approach your local municipality and say, hey, this is the job that I want to do. I want to offer training for poets. This is what I'm intending to do. Then in that way, if you appear on the Central Supplier Database, that's the only way you can get the job with the municipalities or the government department. So it's that registration process. So I've put a link. People will be receiving this link, the slides to actually go through. So I've put a link there so that it's easier for you to actually get in there and get your organization registered on the Central Supplier Database. So it's something that is required. What I've noticed, the requirements are not the same. What is required from National DAC is not the same as what is required from KZN DAC. What is required from an embassy is not the same as required from a government entity, South African government entity. So it's those requirements, but for government purposes, those tax clearance, letter of authority, and sometimes embassies, they'll give you their own forms that you'd need to fill in as well and sign and get signed off, not necessarily the ones that I've listed here. So they've got their own forms that they put up for funding that people need to fill in. So that's about it in terms of proposal writing. And another thing, when you're writing a proposal, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a 10-page or a 20-page proposal. Sometimes, not even sometimes, most of the time, you just need to get to the point. You don't need to write a one-pager of the organization. What is this organization? What is the project? You need to stick to a point. Seriously, those funding bodies don't have time to actually sit and read 20 pages of a proposal. So you need to be as brief as possible and catchy. That's how you catch the eyes of a funder to actually invest in the project that you do. So that will be all, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be taking questions if there are any. Thank you. Mr. Mohammed, I see your hand.
Good evening, Sipindele. There was a question from somebody from Tokushle Masimang. Can you please repeat the issues around an organization and an individual? The differences in the application form for an organization and an individual. Can you please repeat that? He missed that part, so he wants you to repeat that.
Okay. So when you are applying as an organization, you are expected to be registered as an organization. You're expected to have your banking details as an organization. You're expected to have your tax clearance as under your organization. So everything, your organization represents you and the work that you do. But if you are applying as an individual, you are representing yourself directly. So everything that you are submitting, even your bank statement, your bank account will be your bank account. How you the tax number as well. You can I just check? Yes. So on that, as an individual, you are doing the job yourself. You are representing you, who you are, unless you use your same documentation, your individual documentation. The proposal speaks to the project, so you are not responsible for, let's say, for instance, you want to propose that you are running workshops on your own, not as an organization. So everything comes to you. It all boils down to you. You are not protected legally as much as an organization. If you are charged as an individual, your name is attached to it. But if it's an organization, the legal aspects attached to the organization. So if there's a boo-boo or anything that you get yourself into, you to pay for it. But if it's under an organization, the organization is liable for covering your boo-boo or paying the legal fees for the mess that you have made. But you are more on a risk when you are on your own and you get into contractual obligations that you do not understand. But if you're in an organization, the organization gets charged. Ismail has got some also slides that he can share of different companies. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much, Sipindele. I'm going to just go through some of the quick ones that you need to understand, but I just want to add to that particular question that Sipindele spoke about around the individuals and the organizations. Although there are clear distinctions legally between an individual and an organization, it is helpful even as an individual to do a pastel of yourself, the environment in which you work, to do a SWOT analysis of your own so that you know what are your strengths, weaknesses, and so forth as well. So the formats can although the nature of operation is different between an individual and an organization, the principles of planning a proposal can still be very much the same. But to come to these questions about organizations, because not all organizations are the same. So let's go through some of the kind of organizations that apply for funding. One of them is a cultural institution. Now, a cultural institution is any kind of an organization that is formed through legislation by the state. For example, the Market Theatre, the State Theatre, the Baxter Theatre. Those are all cultural institutions that are established in terms of the Cultural Institutions Act, for which the DAC oversees. But you also get institutional organizations, like, for example, ourselves. We're not a cultural institution in terms of the Cultural Act, but we are a cultural institution within the education system, the higher education system, and we're governed by the Higher Education Act. So we can also apply for funding. Then you have not-for-profit organizations, which are the NGOs, the community-based organizations. You can have a Section 21 company. which is a registered company that you create. You have your board of directors, and the objective is that you will trade, you will do business, but whatever money you generate, you will put back into the organization. You could have a Section 18 company, which is also a not-for-profit organization. The difference between a Section 21 company, for example, the National Arts Festival in Makanda is a Section 21 company. A Section 18 company is a company that has very strong focus around educational development, and it can be a cultural organization that also has a very strong focus around education. But what the difference is between a Section 21 and a Section 18 is that as a donor, if I give money to a Section 18 company, I can get a tax rebate as a donor. So for donors, it's attractive to give money to a Section 18 company rather than to a Section 21 company. You get corporate organizations, and this is something new in South Africa. Previously, corporate organizations were not necessarily funded, but because a number of young people are starting off as little entrepreneurs in their own little ways, they can begin to apply for funding as small corporates, as independent entrepreneurs and so forth. And then, of course, there's the individual, that where you apply as a complete individual, and you don't have those same compliance documents, but you still have to provide a proof of your physical address. You have to provide proof of your banking details. You have to prove, a certified copy of your identity document. So the kind of documents may differ slightly, but you still have to be able to provide the kind of necessary proofing and so forth. But it's also important that you understand how different organizations, festivals, and theaters can fund you. And I'll give you a few examples here. For example, a production house. A production house is an institution like us at the Center for the Creative Arts. We don't have our own theater, but we produce 7 different festivals. So we're a producing house. An institution like the Market Theatre the Playhouse very much is a receiving house. They don't produce a lot of their own productions. They receive productions that are ready and they then present them. But you can also be a co-producer. A co-producer is that you jointly have money. We bring some money, you bring some money, and we co-produce a particular production, and we then stage that. Now, some of you may remember Koleka Putuma won the first Distel competition, and that was a co-production that was staged at the Market Theatre, between the Market Theatre, between the National Arts Festival, and funded by Distel. So it's 2 different managements working together to produce a work. And then you get co-presenters, where you take a production and you go, we're not going to be working in the actual development of that production, but the production is ready and we are going to co-present it. And it's very easy to identify a co-presenting production, because when you look at the billing of a poster, it would read, for example, Center for Creative Arts in association with Hear My Voice presents. That means Center for Creative Arts, Hear My Voice are coming in jointly as joint managements, and we are presenting this particular artist or this producer. But when it says Center for Creative Arts in association with Hear My Voice co-producers, it means both of us are putting money into the actual production. So you must understand the difference between producing and presenting. And because that too will impact on the way you try to find your money from the funder that you are going to be engaging with as you go along. Okay, I just want to check. I think there's a few questions on the chat, Sipindle. I'm not sure if you're able to see them. I'm not.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a question, Ismail, that says, how does one protect their intellectual property included in the proposal? The ideas or the innovation that might be in your projects, are there ways besides maybe an NDA?
Yeah, it's very difficult to be able to copyright a proposal. But what you always need to do is that in the narrative part of your proposal, remember when you fill in an application form, they would ask you to complete on the GMS system all the information, and then they would ask you to submit some attachments, which is your business plan, which is the budget, and so forth. And it's always important to be able to take your proposal, and at the bottom of your proposal, to be able to write all intellectual property for this proposal belongs to the Center for Creative Arts, or all intellectual property in this proposal belongs to whoever. And you must put the date on there so that when you submit it, you keep a copy of that. And if you do find at a later stage, like the organization to whom you submitted the funding proposal to is generating a project based on your intellectual property, then you have a case that you can take up with that particular funding agency for stealing your idea. But it's always important to put that onto the narrative document, that this intellectual property, that this proposal is the intellectual property of the organization or of yourself as an artist. But you must also be cautious that, you know, you can't just claim that on a proposal, because I can sit here in this room here today and I can think of a wonderful project, and I don't know that somebody sitting in Kuruman, for example, is thinking about the same project. And we're both sending it in to the National Arts Council for funding. So it just happens that we happen to be thinking about the same thing. So concepts are not always a guarantee of being intellectual property. The actual development, the process, and whatever else must be outlined as the broad intellectual property of the proposal that you can nail down.
Yeah.
Does it answer? I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. There is another question. What do you do if you don't have any references? If it's just your first project that you're doing? You cannot claim not to have any references, even if it's your first project. But I first want to go back to the question that Sipindile discussed in the presentation, is that very often when people apply for proposals, they quickly think of the references and they go like, oh, let's quickly contact the people we know, like right away, the 3 people. But then in our proposal, we say, we have a national footprint. And then you look at your proposal, you go like, these are 3 proposals, 3 references from each town. So how's that a national footprint? So when you say we have, in your proposal, you're saying we have a national footprint, then you must be able to get a proposal from somebody in Cape Town, a reference letter from somebody in Cape Town, a reference letter from somebody that you worked with in Joburg, a reference letter from somebody in the Northwest to show that you do have that reference. That national footprint. But if you're also showing that you are a diverse organization that works in different areas, then your 3 letters must also be very, very different. But let's answer that particular question. If you're applying for a proposal for the very, very first time, and you haven't had a track record of having worked with an organization or whatever, you're just starting off. And this is normal, because you would find young graduates who are coming out of university forced to be able to create their own work, and they write funding proposals. Who are the people that have worked with you as students? Your lecturers, your academics. Can they provide you with a letter of reference? Does the religious leader of your church know you? Can he provide an integrity reference? And when we say an integrity reference, we talk about, can he say that he knows you, you are of good character, that if you are applying for this proposal, you will be conscientious about it, and you will deliver the objectives because you are a committed worker and so forth. So try to find people that you know that can testify, that can verify for you, even if you're starting off for the very first time. There must be somebody that knows you. No person is an island. Okay. There are no further questions on the chats. Maybe we can take more questions. People can just put up their hands and we take questions from there.
Okay, whilst we're waiting for questions, I'm going to just go then through a few more things.
Okay.
But then you can monitor the questions as we go along, Sipindile. And then
All right.
So it's also very important for you to understand how different festivals and how different theaters program, so that this too can help you to begin to think of, well, how am I going to structure my funding proposal? If I'm applying for funding to go, for example, to the National Arts Festival, what do I need to think about? If I want to apply for a funding proposal to be able to take part at Poetry Africa, what are the different pillars that we work with and so forth, which is manifested in our program? Now, all festivals, it doesn't matter whether you're in South Africa or whether you're across the globe, most festivals work with 8 programming pillars. And I'm going to talk you through these pillars here. So let's go through them one by one so that you begin to understand these things. Right, that all theaters and all festivals want to celebrate diversity. So you're going to find things like, we talk about social cohesion, we talk about celebrating our cultural diversity, we talk about addressing the issues of xenophobia, we talk about reflecting the different cultural practices in our community. But what you need to do is you need to be very cautious when you're giving examples in your proposal, that you're not putting people into blocks and ghettos when you're talking about diversity. So you don't say things like, oh, we will showcase an Indian poet and a colored poet and a Chinese poet and a Nigerian poet living in South Africa and 3 South African poets from the township and 1 Afrikaans poet. Because what are you doing? Then you're thinking in the apartheid mentality and you're putting people into little ghettos. But what you could say is that we will draw people from the different cultural groups in South Africa or from diverse languages to interact and engage with each other to be able to create a project that is rich, textured, and diverse. So you're not talking about just population definitions, but you talk about how you draw people to come together and to create. And then you give an example of how is that reflected in the kind of work that you're doing. Okay, let's go to the next pillar. That is, all theaters and all festivals want to be part of social redress. That is, we all want to contribute to transformation. And if you go back to what I discussed yesterday, I said that as arts organizations or funding agencies that get money from the taxpayer, they cannot just give that for the whim and fancy to any little thing. Whatever money they give must be aimed at contributing towards social redress. So you ask yourself the question, this project that we're doing, how is it contributing towards social redress or towards the culture of human rights or towards tolerance or towards any of those kind of things? And particularly in terms of how is it addressing the past imbalances that we've inherited in our country. Okay. Pillar number 3, all theaters want to invest in legacies. All festivals want to invest in legacies. So if we take, for example, just the Poetry Africa Festival, you will notice that we often do retrospective work. Like, for example, when Maisha Jenkins died, there was a tribute on her. When Don Matera died recently, there was a tribute that was done for him. Why are we doing that kind of thing? Because we want to celebrate, we want to invest in legacies. So with us at the Poetry Africa, on the first day of the Poetry Africa Festival, we always start off with the Mafika Gwala lecture. Why is that important for us? Because it's about celebrating the legacy of a renowned South African poet whose work continues to inspire even a new generation. So ask yourself, what are you doing in your work and in your funding proposal to begin to invest in legacies? Let's go to pillar number 4. Theaters want to sharpen the spotlight, or festivals want to sharpen the spotlight. So in Grahamstown, you've got, for example, the Standard Bank Young Artists Award, the Arts and Culture Trust Impact Awards. The Market Theatre had the Sophie Mgina New Voices Award. What do we have at Poetry Africa? We have the featured poet, we have the keynote poet, we have other categories that we create. And why do we do that? Because we do that, we want to sharpen the spotlight on one particular poet during that particular year, highlight that poet, highlight their work, allow the audiences to be able to address that even more clearly. So in your own funding proposals, you can begin to say, we are going to be able to create a program through which we highlight or we showcase or sharpen the spotlight on a particular poet or 2 or 3 poets in a particular year. Okay. All theatres, all festivals want to be building blocks for skills transfer. That is, you must, in your proposal, this is very essential because all funding in South Africa, particularly public funding, is aimed at development, at growth, at new entry people and so forth. So you must be able to show how is your program contributing towards skills transfer or towards building blocks. So if you've taken somebody who's come in your training program this year, how are they going to be featured in your program next year? Or are people who come into your development workshops remaining in the development workshops all the time? So we at the Center for the Creative Arts work with a set of Durban artists, whether it is in Jamba or whether it is in Poetry Africa or any of our Time of the Writer programs. Throughout the year, we work with them in skills building. But when it comes to festival, we put some of them into the main festival. Why? Because we want to demonstrate that our skills transfer programs, which are funded, are not just workshops in themselves, but that they end up as building blocks for those who've come into a workshop situation to be able to go to the next level. And I think that is really crucial for your funder to be able to understand. Pillar number 6, you want to be juries of excellence. And this is something that all festivals or all theatres try to do. So, for example, at the Center for Creative Arts, through the Poetry Africa Festival, we run the annual slam poetry competition. Why do we do that? Because that is about juries of excellence. We want to measure, we want to pit each other, artists against each other. We want to see who are the winning voices and so forth. Are you beginning to develop that kind of a system within your organization where you create these juries of excellence, where people can begin to see what you're doing and so forth? Pillar number 7, theatres need partnerships to produce new writing or new work. That is, are you reflecting it in your program or are you always just creating on your own? And it goes to what I discussed yesterday. That is, your funder feels a lot more secure when you're not working in a silo. Your funder wants to see you working collaboratively with others, sharing, because it simply means that the burden, the load, the responsibilities, the risks are reduced through co-partnerships and so forth. And is that being reflected in the kind of work that you're doing? 8, new commissions. That is, are you defining theatres as change makers at the center of change, at the front line where history gets written or retold? That is your work as a poetry organization at the forefront of bringing about change, not just change in terms of the way our societies are, but change in the way in which we make art. Are we provocative? Are we taking chances? To give you a few examples, like last year with Poetry Africa, we put a few poets in a taxi and we asked Musa Latswayo to drive those poets through the city in the taxi. Of course, for some of the passengers of the taxi, it was like, what's happening in this taxi? These poets are suddenly speaking out poems. And then, of course, it became an interactive thing. And that became quite popular, more popular than what we thought it would become. So the kind of poets in the taxi is an innovative thing. Are you driving change, or are you always thinking, we're going to do another poetry event, we need to get a hall, we need to get microphones, we need to get stand, we need to get lighting? No. Can we take poetry into taxis? Can we take poetry into that particular space? Can we merge poetry with jazz? Can we mix poetry with dances? Because then we're bringing the different audiences together and so forth. So those are the kind of 8 pillars that are crucial for you to understand, because if you understand that as well, you will be able to sharpen the way you write your funding proposal, because you're not just writing a funding proposal, but you say, I am aiming my funding proposal to participate in this festival or this theater, which has a strong focus around new writing. Or but I want to aim my work to participate at that festival where the focus is on building blocks and sharpening the focus. So can you see, understanding these pillars of the way artistic directors think and the way theater managers and so forth think allows you to be able to understand the way you need to shape your proposal as well. And it addresses the question, like people would say, I do this kind of work, but no theater wants to take my work. Yes, no theatre wants to take your work because you're not understanding the artistic vision or the artistic mission of that particular theatre. In order to get into a co-production or co-presenting agreement with the theatre management, you must have a clear understanding of what is their artistic direction and their artistic vision, which, which is determined by these 8 pillars. So I'm going to stop there and let's take some more questions.
Currently, there are no questions on the chat, but however, there is a comment from Kagaza saying this is such a useful information for far more strategic approach to proposals. Thank you, CCA.
Absolute pleasure. We're delighted that we can partner with Hear My Voice and be funded by the Goethe-Institut, the French Institute of South Africa, Wallonie-Bruxelles, and the Representation of Flanders, and of course with Kakaza coordinating at the logistics and planning everything. This has been a wonderful opportunity for dialogue. I think what is crucial for us at the Center for Creative Arts is that we share this knowledge and experience and information that we've built over the years, because by being able to share this, we don't just grow our own organization, we grow the artists with whom we work with, but we grow the entire creative economy together. And I think there's a need, an increasing need for everyone in the sector to be able to work collaboratively, because we know that funding resources are becoming more constrained. It's beginning to fall into a funnel, but we don't all have to clamor to fall through the nozzle of the funnel. We need to clamber up to hold the umbrella ahead, above our heads together, so that we all fall under the same shade and benefit from the comfort of that umbrella.
Yes, thank you so much, Letobo for summarizing all the pillars. I think that what she just posted on our chats.
Yeah. I just want to add that the CCA is presenting 4 workshops in the series. Tomorrow we deal with some of the matters on administration, and on Saturday we look at the kind of multimedia approaches to working. What we will do is we will put the 4 presentations together, and we will forward the 4 presentations together as a package to Kakaza to be shared with everyone, because we want people to be able to interrogate, to learn from, to benefit from these, and to be able to use this as a kind of do-it-yourself kit whenever you're writing your proposals.
All right, there seems to be no questions on the chat. Do we have maybe anyone who would like to ask a question? Okay, so we are going to do a poll, the polls. So Bash, can you just put them up? You can all participate in the polls that we have on screen currently. Thank you so much, colleagues, for joining us in. Feel free to actually contact us even after this session, as the CCA will be able to engage with you. Like Ismail has said, we'll be sharing the information via Kakaza's office, so that you ensure that you've got the tools to actually equip you to secure more funding for the projects that you are doing, and looking forward to future collaborations with all people with interest in collaborating with the Center for Creative Arts and the projects that we do. Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Come on.